philosophy of social research. Philosophers of social science, and it really goes back to the 19th century, addresses big questions, and you will see some of them on the screen. So what is the nature of science? What is the nature of scientific research? How do we distinguish between science and non-science or pseudoscience? And then there are these big concepts like truth and objectivity and rationality and validity. What do these concepts mean? And then also there's the kind of ontological question, does social reality exist, or are there more than one social reality? Is social science research, which includes business and economics research, is it fundamentally different from natural science research, what people do in physics and chemistry and engineering and so on? So this is the first point, is that philosophy of science or philosophy of research addresses some of these big questions. So some people refer to these as foundational issues, transcendental issues. Under what conditions do we know phenomena? Is social science inquiry similar to inquiry in natural sciences? Are the methodologies of the natural and social sciences the same? Very often in the natural sciences, there's the view that the aim of science is to formulate scientific laws so that we can, like Newton's law and Einstein's law, so that we can predict the behavior of natural phenomena. Now, is that the same purpose in the social sciences? Is it the aim in the social sciences to formulate laws of human behavior? And what would that mean? Because perhaps the distinctive criterion of a PhD in any field of science, and this doesn't apply only to South Africa, is that you are required to make a contribution to the body of knowledge. Now, what will be the nature of your contribution in whatever you study? Whether you study leadership or entrepreneurship or financial management or mergers or whatever the case, the topic of your PhD is going to be, how will you make a contribution of knowledge, and what will be acceptable as good science? You cannot present a PhD that is purely descriptive, where you just say, oh, I've made all of these observations, I've done questionnaires on the organization, and these are results, and you don't try to make sense of those results by developing a conceptual framework or a theory. My view of social science is, at the PhD level, we have to have theory-based explanations and interpretations of the social world. I guess the most important set of slides in this pack are around the three worlds framework. How is scientific knowledge or scientific inquiry different from ordinary knowledge? Ordinary knowledge is very often built around the personal authority of a particular individual. Pronouncements by different people carry different weights and authorities because of the individual. So if Mandela says something, we take it very seriously, or someone like Tutu or Mother Teresa, or whatever the context might be. Whereas other people might speak on the same topic and we take it less seriously, because in everyday life it is the case that who says something is sometimes important. In the world of science, it doesn't matter who you are. Despite the fact, well, I'll have to qualify it, because you might say, well, hang on, what about people like Einstein and Newton and these people? But you see, the examples, if we go to the so-called big scientists, and Crick and Watson and these guys, or Porter, for his contributions, it is the reason why their work is regarded as authoritative, is not necessarily because what they said, or who they are, but what they said. The world of science is essentially a system that is based on peer review. When you publish an article, it's submitted for peer review, so other people who are supposed to be experts in the field judge that what you are saying in your article is borne out by the evidence. In science, there's a very big emphasis on what I call the collective accumulated experience and expertise of the scientific community. The second distinction is that ordinary knowledge can be very unsystematic, very haphazard. In fact, there's another word that I always tell my students never to use in a dissertation, and that is anecdotal. And so much of what we do in everyday life is based on anecdotal, unsystematic, haphazard experiences that are not checked and not systematically checked. In science, we gather stuff systematically. It must always be possible that the evidence that we gather in science, the evidence that we analyze and write up, must in principle be able to be checked by someone else. Certainly in science, unfortunately, I do not trust what you say just because you say that. I need to verify it. In everyday life, we take the natural attitude is to believe what we see, to take things at face value. But in the world of science, we never take things at face value. So if you say, I've done a study and I've interviewed so many people and 80% of them said that, my first question to you can be, I want to see your evidence. I want to see your questions. I want to see your data. I want to see your statistics. If you can provide evidence for what you say, it puts you on the same equal footing as someone else who's worked in the field for 30 years. The purpose of this framework is to distinguish between different forms of human knowledge. It's a framework about knowledge. It's not a framework about other stuff. It's about how we understand knowledge and essentially how we distinguish scientific knowledge, social scientific, business scientific knowledge from everyday knowledge. World 1 is the world of everyday life. World 2 is the world of science or scientific knowledge. And World 3 is the world of meta-science, the stuff that philosophy of science is made up and so on. In the world of everyday life, which we all inhabit, consists of ordinary people engaging in their normal everyday behaviors and interactions. Our ordinary lives are already complex systems. Ludwig Wittgenstein, who was one of the best philosophers of the 20th century, talked about these different worlds as different language games. It's a nice concept. It's like different games with different rules. The rules constitute the organization, constitute the relationships. It's in the same way that you would say in soccer, the offside rule constitutes a key part of the game. If the offside rule disappears, then the game of soccer probably changes into something else. And in everyday life, knowledge comes in various forms. If you think about it, it comes in the form of technical knowledge, know-how, how to do things. It comes in the form of moral knowledge, what to do, what is right and wrong. Knowledge is an integral part of our everyday lives. But my first argument in this three-world framework is that what drives the acquisition and the consumption of knowledge in World 1 is a very pragmatic interest in coping. We need knowledge to be able to cope as human beings. Now, if we move to the world of science, I distinguish between the world of scientific knowledge, the body of scientific knowledge, and scientific research as a research process. My second argument is that in the world of science and scientific inquiry, and now by science I mean all the scientific disciplines, what drives knowledge production, including the production of your PhD, is what I call the epistemic imperative. Now, the word epistemic is the Greek term for truthful knowledge. The world of scientific research or scholarship is driven by this imperative. The reason why I use the word imperative is it's a kind of moral obligation. In a sense, this is the Hippocratic oath of scholarship. If you want to call yourself a scholar, you must always strive to produce the most valid, credible, truthful knowledge. And then there's the world of meta-science. Now, the word meta means reflection about science. And this is really the field of the philosophy of science, the sociology of science, and the aim in reflections on the nature of science, which is really what we're doing this morning, by the way. If you think about what we're doing this last hour and a half, we're not doing science, we're not gathering data, we're not interviewing, we're talking about science. World 1, what I call the world of everyday life, is the object of our investigation in World 2. So in World 2, the world of science, you will see those arrows going down there. In the world of science, we make some phenomenon, some object. We talk about the objects of science or phenomena that we study. We make them into objects of inquiry, objects of investigation. So in the world of science, I distinguish between the body of knowledge, that elliptical circle, that is the body of science that accumulates in every discipline. And that body of scholarship, which is in that elliptical circle, informs the research process, which starts with a problem statement, choice of research design, choice of methodology, and ultimately some conclusions. In World 1, we experience things. In World 1, we experience crime or unemployment or poverty or organizational change or strategic alliances or leadership problems or whatever the case might be. In World 2, we make those things that we experience in World 1 into an object of inquiry. We study them. They now become units of analysis. Now, in World 3, the world of meta-science, this is the world where we reflect on World 2. So in the same way that World 1 is the object of World 2, World 2 is the object of study or reflection in the meta-science. To summarize what I said previously, In World 1, everyday life knowledge construction is driven by a pragmatic interest. In World 2 of science, epistemic imperative, the search for truthful knowledge. And World 3, the interest is in critical in reflection to improve the practice of research. Ultimately, if you want to reduce the scientific research process to its core elements, you can identify 4 elements. There is the researcher, which I call the sociological dimension, the scientist, that's you. And that researcher, the reason why I refer to that as the sociological dimension is because you as a new scholar or a PhD scholar comes with a certain training, certain sets of beliefs about science. You come with certain practical experience. Some of you would have done some research, some would have to learn new research skills. So it is not just you as an individual. You come with a certain social history. You will then engage for your PhD in the research process, and there the key decisions are about research design and methodology, and the ultimate aim is to produce valid, truthful knowledge, which is the epistemological dimension, and all of this is underpinned by whatever object, the phenomenon that you study in World 1. So above the line is World 2, the world of science, below the line is World 1, and we can call that, if you want to give it a fancy name, the ontological dimension. There are 4 concepts, if you want to talk about the total scientific research process: the sociological dimension, the methodological dimension, epistemological, and ontological. But methodology is the way that the approach, the way that you follow, the road that you follow to your destination. Your destination, remember, is the most truthful, credible, valid knowledge that you can produce, the best findings that you can produce, the best theory that you can produce through your PhD. And so methodology is always about how. The other term that I've used a few times now is research design. And I just want to make this distinction in closing. I actually feel quite strongly about this, that our students have to distinguish between the type of study that they choose, which is a type of design, and how they will do the study. Design is about the type of study. It's about issues of validity and evidence, and methodology is about how you do this. When you come up with an idea for research, and you've read through the literature, and you've settled on a set of research questions or propositions, the next step that you should follow is to say, now this idea, what kind of study, what type of study would address this idea? And so my point that I want to end off with is that in your planning for your studies in your PhD, out of your review of the scholarship, your first aim should be to define a set of questions that will help you choose the right type of study. And this is where your supervisor helps you to say, okay, we have agreement that what you're going to do is a survey type study, or we have agreement you're going to do a case study. This is a decision about the type of study. And this is a logical question about what kind of evidence do you require to answer your own research questions. Then we start to talk methodology. Then we say, and methodology, questions about method are essentially about 4 choices. Let me just list them for you. It's about selecting your cases or sampling. So the second one is about measurement. What tools are you going to use to measure your cases? The third element is data collection methods. And the fourth one, of course, is analysis, statistical or qualitative analysis. And those are methodological questions, so questions about research methods. And they differ from design to design. And that's why it is absolutely essential that in the logic of your research process, that you go from a review of your scholarship, identify your research questions, choose your design, and then the appropriate methods. And that's good practice in research. And I'll leave you at that note. Thank you.